What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. Showing is not just what a character observes or what a character does. It's not just what they feel. The art of showing is blending what can be observed from the outside with what can be felt or thought on the inside. And that's more subtle. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach. And each week, we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Show don't tell is one of those writing rules that confuses writers more than it helps. It's one of those mantras that's overused and misunderstood. Writers have a hard time grasping it because it's never fully explained. It's a soundbite. And as with most writing rules, there is a lot more to it. And what happens is that writers show the wrong things, or they show too little, or they show poorly, and often they're not showing at all. Writers go wrong when they take the advice too literally. And that's because you hear things like, "Don't tell me Sarah is sad, show her crying. Don't tell me mom is angry at dad, show her throwing dishes at the wall." You also get advice to eliminate adverbs. For example, she said nervously. That's good advice, certainly. Adverbs are extraneous. They're dead words. But then we get something like this. She shifted her eyes, hands clinging together, as if wringing an invisible wet cloth. Okay, so here's where you might be getting thrown off. You're thinking of the showing as only what can be observed from the outside. You're relying on body language, gestures, or action to convey anger or nervousness or sadness. So you're relying on the physical details as though we're watching the characters on a movie screen. So we'll get rivulets of tears, or the shifting eyes, or the wringing hands. So the showing is limited to what is seen and observed from the outside. Now, there are times when you just want to show the physical details, and we'll get to that. But often to telegraph anger, we'll get something cliche, like he gritted his teeth, or he pounded his fist on the table, something that doesn't give us anything new. There's nothing we can derive from that. So the reader is denied the thrill of interpreting, of participating in making meaning out of what's on the page. Because the writer is staying entirely on the outside of the story. So, one of the most common mistakes with showing is limiting it to what can be observed from the outside, the gritted teeth, the clenched hands, etc. Another mistake is showing the characters' emotions by their physiological response. So we'll get something like this. A stabbing pain struck the pit of his stomach. She felt her heart plummet. Now, this doesn't show us remotely anything about how these characters feel. The thing that separates a narrative story from a movie is that we're able to go where the camera can't, inside a character's heart and mind. We can enter not just their bodies, not just what they can see and observe, but we can enter their thoughts and feelings. We can be privy to their thought process so that we have some context for the choices they make, for their reactions to what's happening, and so on. The trick with showing is showing why a character does something, why they feel the way they do, why they're angry, why they're grieving, what caused the fight, why are they fighting. In other words, rather than show the what, show the why. Showing is not just what a character observes or what a character does. It's not just what they feel. The art of showing is blending what can be observed from the outside with what can be felt or thought on the inside. And that's more subtle. So let's dig in. Most often, what we mean by show, don't tell, is show us the event unfolding in real time. Show us the event unfolding in real time. So telling is when you give us conclusions to something we haven't seen played out. So we have no context for it. For example, if you tell us Frank and April had a fight, but you don't show the fight in real time, the reader is denied the thrill of anticipating what might happen next, moment by moment. And the fight between Frank and April will have no meaning to the reader. They won't know why Frank and April are fighting in the first place. It could also help to show what led up to the fight so that it doesn't come out of left field. Even a flashback, even something that happened in your character's past, is unfolding in the present for the reader. Now, there are two reasons you want to show us the event as it's happening. Number one, it will help us anticipate what might happen next. And number two, it will often explain why the event happened, why the fight happened, why the character feels a certain way. So we don't want to know just the what, we want to know the why. The reader is always looking for meaning. That's what keeps the reader hooked into your story page by page. So if you tell us Frank is worried about meeting his wife backstage after she bombs at her amateur performance in a play, that's a foregone conclusion. It deflates all the tension. Just bring us backstage. Let the tensions escalate. Let the scene unfold for us in real time. If you show us the event unfolding in real time, the reader gets two boons. They get to anticipate all that might happen, and they'll understand why it's happening. So number one, show the event unfolding in real time. Don't give us the conclusion. So rather than tell us what already happened, Show the cause. Number 2, show the how. Sometimes when something's too told, a character will do something or make a decision and we have no context for it. So it'll come out of left field. So another way to show is to show us the thought process of your protagonist. Now, writers are often afraid to show their protagonist's thoughts because they think it's a form of telling. But thought is action. Thought is action. It's not a form of telling. It gives what your character does or what they feel context. It helps your reader understand what motivates a character through the story. So, if Frank accepts the job promotion at the end of the novel instead of moving to Paris to start a new life, we need to have seen that thought process over time that led to his decision. Characters are always doing 3 things in a scene: reflecting about where they've just been, thinking about what's happening now in the present, and they're anticipating what might happen next. So here's an example from Revolutionary Road. This is after April's failed performance in a play, and there's tension between husband and wife when Frank meets her backstage in her dressing room. So he tries to appease her, but he insults her instead. And then they're driving home. Listen for his thought process during the drive. With a confident, fluid grace, he steered the car out of the bouncy side of the road and on the hard, clean straightaway Route 12, feeling that his attitude was on solid ground at last. Okay, so here he's thinking in the present. He thinks, okay, we're good now. We're on solid ground. Things are okay. A refreshing wind rushed in to ruffle his short hair and cool his brains, and he began to see the fiasco of the Laurel Players in its true perspective. Okay, so now he's thinking back to what just happened in the scene before. It simply wasn't worth feeling bad about. Intelligent, thinking people could take things like this in their stride, just as they took the larger absurdities of deadly dull jobs in the city and deadly dull homes in the suburbs. Economic circumstances might force you to live in this environment, but the important thing was to keep from being contaminated. The important thing always was to remember who you were. So he starts out thinking about where he is in the present. He thinks he's okay. Him and his wife are okay at this point. And then he's thinking about what just happened on stage where his wife bombed. So we're starting to see his thought process. He's thinking through this drive. You know, people are never just driving. They're always thinking, right? So he's thinking his way through this moment in the scene. So this happens on page 20, shortly before the fight between Frank and April hits a critical mass. More importantly, though, it's starting to give us insight into what motivates Frank through the novel and why he makes the choices he makes. By the way, I did a whole episode on character thought. Episode 69, Create Plot Continuity with Character Thought. That's episode 69, Create Plot Continuity with Character Thought. I'll link in the show notes. Okay, on to number 3. Be concrete. You want to avoid abstractions. Abstractions are these big ideas or big emotions like love or grief or anger. But the reader can intellectualize love, grief, and anger, but they can't feel it because these are general. They don't show us remotely anything about the idea or the emotion. Often the best way to show is to imbue the details or the description with the emotion. So rather than say something like her guts twisted in her stomach, you anchor concrete details in her consciousness. Because even when the character is observing the world from the outside, the emotion is imbued in the physical details. So the thing here is to make the reader feel the emotion, not force the character to feel it. Make the reader feel the emotion. Grief, sadness, whatever the emotion may be, can't really be telegraphed by going at the emotion directly. Often to get the greatest emotional payoff, you need to get at the emotion aslant. Now, when you bring concrete details into the scene, you activate the limbic part of your reader's brain. So the reader experiences the story, experiences the scene, the emotion, as though it's really happening to him or her. They feel with your character. So here's an example of something that is not very concrete. The damaged skin around his fingernails were signs of another nervous habit. This is not showing anything, it's telling. Damaged skin is general. What does damaged skin look like? Nervous is very abstract. So how can you give us an image of damaged skin around the fingernails? What does that look like? How can you embody that nervousness in the concrete? How can you show the nervousness, show the damaged skin? Give us an image. What does damaged skin around his fingernails look like? For starters, how about not telling us he's nervous? How about something like this? He examines his fingernails, bitten to the nub. He picks at his cuticle, peels away a strand of skin. His fingers make him think of stumps, amputated arms. That's more visual. That gives us a sense of not just nervousness, but anxiety, of despair. Emotions are never one thing or the other. They're multidimensional. So what about big emotions like grief? Well, here's an example from the prologue of Comfort, A Journey Through Grief. This is a memoir by Anne Hood. So she begins with all the platitudes she hears from friends and from the world at large. So this is how she starts. Time heals. She is in a better place. She is still with you. You should walk every day. You should write this down. You should go to church, to therapy, to the cemetery. These things will help you. There is a heaven, and you will see her again there. Time heals. Okay, so then she goes on to the final platitude. Once you have lived through all the firsts, it will get better. So having gone through the platitudes and having someone say, once you live through all the firsts, she launches into all the firsts that she's going to miss. The first summer at the beach without her elaborate sandcastles, the first day of school when she would have put on her purple leopard backpack with her collection of keychains, a starfish, miniature Lincoln logs, the butterfly from Japan, and walked into first grade, her 6th birthday, and her customary costume painting tea party, birthday party, the first Halloween without her dressing as something with wings, an angel, a fairy, a ladybug, the first Thanksgiving when her face does not appear among the 30 others eating 2 23-pound turkeys in our dining room, the first Christmas that I do not have to hide art supplies in the closet in my study, the bags bulging with glitter markers and crayons and sketch pads and modeling clay and watercolors and fat paintbrushes and gel pens and rolls of stickers of smiley faces and daisies and puppies and stars. And she goes on about all these firsts. And then she says, after you have survived all of those things, it will get easier to live without her. But we know that it's not going to get easier. Now, when I first heard Ann Hood read this at the Woodstock Book Fest, I was in tears. I mean, I was devastated. I wept. I wasn't even a mother at that time. And yet I felt that loss as profoundly, as viscerally, as though I had lost my own child. So, number 2, be concrete. Be specific. Avoid abstractions. You want to think big, but write small, because really, it's the small things that break our hearts. And number 4, give us images. Showing is all about giving the reader images. Readers respond emotionally to images, not to information. Now, there are times when you do need to show just the visual, just the physical details. For example, if we have a scene where Frank and April fight and we see them in action, they're going at it and they're really blowing up, you don't want to simply say at any point, Frank was angry or enraged, whatever the feeling is. Here's where you want to give us a visual image of his anger. He swung out one trembling fist for a backhanded blow to her head, and she cowered against the fender in an ugly crumple of fear. Then, instead of hitting her, he danced away in a travesty of boxer's footwork and brought the fist down on the roof of the car with all his strength. He hit the car 4 times that way, bong, 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 while she stood and watched. When he was finished, the shrill, liquid chant of the peepers was the only sound for miles. So here we're on the outside. We're getting more of a long shot here. We're watching the scene unfold. We see it. We don't get something abstract like Frank's insides boiled inside of him. We get the action straight up. We get the straight visual. Because here's the thing about emotion. It's never one thing or the other. It's never just pure anger. He's not just angry in this scene. He's hurt. He's humiliated. He feels unappreciated. Another time where just the physical details is appropriate is when what you're describing is purely visual in nature. For example, a place or a setting. Here's another example from Revolutionary Road. The architects of the Knox building had wasted no time in trying to make it look taller than its 20 stories, with the result that it looked shorter. They hadn't bothered trying to make it handsome either, and so it was ugly, slab-sided and flat-topped, with a narrow pea-green cornice that jutted like the lip of a driven stake. It stood in an appropriately humdrum section of Lower Midtown, and from the very day of its grand opening, early in the century, it must clearly have been destined to settle deep into that smoke-hung clutter of numberless rectilinear shapes out of which, in aerial photographs, the mightier towers of New York emerge and rise. Okay, so notice the author does use some general abstract words like ugly and shorter and so on, but the details give us the proof. So he surrounds those general abstract words with very concrete images. You want to make sure that the image is not just there to provide decoration, not just for the sake of description. You want to drop into the character's consciousness or reveal something about your character. Now, this particular description is not coming from the main character. It's coming from the more omniscient narrator, but it's telling us something very essential about the main character. So in the description of the Knox building where Frank Wheeler works, it conveys the sense of boredom that plagues both he and his wife, April. The Wheelers battle boredom throughout the novel. Remember his character thought? Thinking people could take things like this in their stride, just as they took the larger absurdities of deadly dull jobs in the city and deadly dull homes in the suburbs. See the connection? That boredom, that desire to escape the trap of the American dream, to escape the suburbs, is already there before the novel starts on page 1. It's the impetus for April's leading role in an amateur play in which she fails, which also leads to the fight. And that dream has died with marriage and motherhood, and it's what exacerbates the Wheelers' marital problems, that boredom. So showing refers to selecting and slanting the details to convey something essential about your protagonist. Showing refers to selecting and slanting the details to convey something essential about your protagonist. If, for example, your character is feeling sad or is grieving, the selected details will be different, and they'll be slanted to reveal the underlying emotion. So there you have it. Let's wrap this up. Number 1, show the event unfolding in real time. The reader will then be able to anticipate what might happen next as the scene unfolds, and they'll understand why the event happened. Number 2, show how. Rather than simply have your character make a choice or a decision, show the thought process that led to it. For more on character thought, listen to episode 69, Create Plot Continuity with Character Thought. I'll link in the show notes. Number 3, be concrete. Avoid abstractions. The idea is to make the reader feel something, to experience something. And the way to do that is through concrete, specific detail. Number 4, give us images. There are times when showing from the outside is the right approach, is the best approach. And this is often when you're giving us something that's visual in nature, like a setting or description. You just want to make sure that the image is anchored in your character's consciousness. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who might be helped by this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general, I would be ever so grateful if you passed this along. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing brightens my day and inspires my topics for the show. I'll see you next week, same time, same place. Till then, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.